Good afternoon, good morning, good late afternoon to some of you joining us overseas. Our audience takes us to Europe and beyond. We actually are just returning. My name is John Carroll. I'm the CEO and founder of the Service Council. Welcome to today's in-service podcast event, Creating a Culture of Service, Deploying a Human-Centered Approach, Deploying a Humanity-Centered Approach. I'm really excited to be joined by my colleague and co-author of the latest book, Service is Humanity. Bob has a copy, I have a copy. Really excited to welcome Bob back to the platform here to have a discussion today about getting into some of the how, right? And some of the executional opportunities here. Bob, good morning. Good afternoon.
Good morning. It's great. It's great to be here, John. This is a great opportunity for us to kind of talk about what we've put together over the last year. So looking very much forward to the conversation.
Love it. Thank you so much. And we'll jump right into it in just a moment here. We'll be about 30-ish minutes here. We'll try to keep it succinct and straightforward. Just a quick topic introduction. We here at the Service Council, we're commonly talking about business and service transformation. At our recent Smarter Services Executive Symposium, we heard from many major brands like TK Elevator, Rolls-Royce, Hologic, and many others. And the framing is, we took this traditional framing of people, process, technology, and data, and we started to sort of evolve it into this 5P positioning, where we think that people deserves to have a carve out, and philosophy comes out of people so that it has its own central focus. And so we've been reframing and introducing it as philosophy, people, process, platform, and parts. And when people talk about service transformation, more simply in a business sense, the frame X's and O's is commonly used, and it refers to the fundamentals and the tactics and the strategies used to achieve some goal or some set of goals and objectives. But it's not the X's and O's. It's the Jimmys and Joes, or to be more culturally appropriate, it's the Jimmys and Margos, right? So people, we believe, is going to become a critical ingredient to differentiated service, to differentiated customer experience. And when we talk about Service is Humanity, the book, which all of our guests got a copy of this, it's going on Amazon soon. I can't wait for that, Bob. Really excited about that.
Yeah.
But we framed Service is Humanity in a couple of different ways. We framed it from a human dignity perspective, the recognition that every person, regardless of role, title, circumstance, deserves that respect and care. The human connection element, so the ability to create trust and empathy in our interactions, seeing the person, not just the transaction. I think that's incredibly important, especially in today's culture and environment where automation is just taking over everything, and the decisions between what to automate and what to humanize, it becomes a critical discussion internally. And then lastly, human responsibility, using our skills, technology, platforms responsibly to improve lives, and not just drive efficiency or profit, but really create those lasting moments that sits with customers and humans in a way that's meaningful. So really excited to dive in and talk a little bit about the principles and get into how, and use Bob's operational experience, leading global service for Dell Technologies for 25 plus years. Me and the team I just talked about, we just came back from Europe. We were over in Friedrichshafen, Germany at our most recent Service Journey Day, hosted by Rolls-Royce Power Systems. Thank you, call out, shout out, Jörn Lindstad, Senior Vice President of Services for Rolls-Royce Power Systems. Appreciate your hosting, your hospitality, your humanity. Thank you. What stuck with me though was interesting. There's so many things, right? The discussion at the workshop, the operational experience we got to see at Rolls-Royce, some of the culture of the area was just amazing. And I'm hopping off the train from Friedrichshafen after taking the ferry in Romanshorn and all that stuff. And I get on the subway to Zurich Airport, the terminals, and a little jump scare occurred. And over the loudspeaker comes on this cow that moves in everybody's ear, and everybody was like, whoa, holy cow. And the windows turned into this this image of, you know, the experience and the culture of Zurich. And you know, you could hear cows mooing, you could hear music, you could hear cowbells, horns, yodeling. And I'm like, wow, that is pretty freaking cool. Like passengers were, you know, we're on a subway under a tunnel in this gross area. And I'll tell you, in Boston, they don't do any of that stuff. You're on a subway.
Yeah.
It's just
I don't know what they would pipe in for noise.
Slightly less clean, Bob.
Yeah.
But it was just unbelievable to see how they infused the you know, Swiss humor and culture. And that was the unexpected, memorable experience they wanted to leave you with, right? It had a sense of humility and a sense of humanity to it. And I just
and they did. They left
yeah.
you with that experience.
Yeah, it was wonderful. It was wonderful. So love it. And so Bob, why don't we jump into our discussion here and start to frame out not only what are the pages on the book, what are the words on the pages, excuse me, but what does it mean to operational leaders? How do they embrace a services humanity culture? And you know, inside the book, we talk about rediscovering the soul of a service. Why do you think organizations have, you know, if we're rediscovering it, why has it drifted away? Where has it gone? And what is?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on this a little bit, John. But so I was at Dell Technologies for almost 26 years in the services business. I ran everything from field services to tech support was my to everything in between. Tech support was kind of my last big role with thousands of people all around the globe and thousands of contractors. And the one thing that you can imagine in my time at Dell, technology changed from having a PC was a big deal to going now to the AI world. Yeah. And at the heart of everything was always the customer. And what we always tried to do, or what I tried to do, was, okay, how do we keep that connection with the customer? Because at the end of the day, if the customer's happy, regardless of what technology that we're leveraging to make them happy or make them have a great experience, they're going to buy more stuff from us, from what's in our portfolio. And so, and what I would always talk about to the teams were, look, I don't get great customers and I don't get great financial results without having great team members and great leaders and people who really can empathize with what a customer is going through and don't put a customer through the internal challenges that we may have within our own business. And so to me, that soul of at the end of the day, a service transaction is a connection point between one person in an enterprise and another person in that enterprise in some form or fashion is key. And that's an emotional connection. If you can make it a positive emotional connection, that leads to even more benefits for you as an enterprise. If it's a negative one, we know the repercussions of that.
100%, and that's a critical part. That every customer touch point becomes a conversion opportunity, whether you're deepening the experience or it's eroding the experience, and to what degree does that impact profit? You know, through retention, customer expansion, customer repeat. And so I love that viewpoint. And I want to touch upon the human element, because the other thing here, you know, is, you know, this notion that, you know, there's a lot of friction in the world in terms of seeking support when you need it. And, you know, that's both inside the organization and it's also at the customer level. And I just wanted to tie back to you in terms of, you know, what did you experience in terms of that human side of service? That's a good call out for our listening audience. Maybe some of the friction points.
I'll tell you, when I was first a leader years ago, I never would open up about personal life or connections, or I had a rule where I didn't have friends in the business. They were just outside. And that I kind of learned over time, really what makes you a strong leader is that connection, human connection, personal connection you can make to your teams. So talking about personal experiences, talking about failures, talking about things like illnesses, whether they are physical or, you know, going through mental health issues or whatever it might be, people connect with stories because they can relate to them. And I think as I continued to grow as a leader, I realized more and more that the more I shared about myself and my personal challenges and my experiences, the more of a connection it made with the team, and the more people felt they were in a safe space to talk similarly to their own teams or about their own experiences. And I think those type of connections really lead to, okay, well, how are customers going to experience something with us? If we know what we've gone through, or what they may be going through from a personal perspective. So I think really opening up to people and sharing yourselves. And I've seen leaders and I've coached leaders who don't do that. I had somebody I mentored, all they had on their desk was a lamp. They had no pictures of personal life. They had no pictures of pets. They had no idea what they did outside of the four walls. And they always struggled with making connections with people. And it's like, well, you got to share. If you want to make a connection, you got to share.
Yeah. It's quite robotic to live in that bubble of where, this is just a punch a clock, get in there, automate, do your thing and plug out. I mean, there are human elements that impact your day-to-day life, and bringing that authenticity is quite important. And, there are some other things, right, that, this pressure from service to contribute to profit, and this pressure from service to be, optimally executed so that cost reduction efforts are maintained, and all this push for margin, and God help us, right? What's happening is inside the organization, we're seeing our frontline, we're seeing our service teams, more broadly speaking, pressured to do more with less, to contribute more, to automate, to fit more into your day, to work overtime, time away from family, and those pressure points are dissipating the human experience inside the organization. And as Elizabeth Dixon from Chick-fil-A reminds us, the customer experience is the overflow of employee experience, right? And so when we start to pressurize internally, it starts to impact externally, right? So a quick reminder there. For leaders listening today, Bob, what would you suggest? How can they sort of recognize whether their organization has lost touch with service, right? Has lost touch with this humanity approach?
Look, I think a very simple thing is talk to your frontline employees. Don't let layers of management get in the way of finding out what your frontline employees are experiencing, and talk to your customers. Surveys are great. The data is great. We would do internal surveys of the employee experience, and we would do external surveys of the customer experience. And the numbers were always pretty solid. But what I took more out of was the verbatims and what people would say in the comments. I was known as someone who, with the size of the organization I had, I would have 12,000 comments come back to me in our employee survey, and I would read every single one. It would take me a month, but I'd read every single one, because I'm like, there was no other opportunity for so many people to have feedback directly to me. And some of those things weren't even great about me. Like, I would have to take that feedback and figure out, okay, what do I got to do about this? But I think you've got to have those conversations. Don't just rely on technology to tell you how your culture is working and what that is doing to your customers. You've got to physically talk to people, which becomes even more and more of a challenge in today's world, with the technology that we have. And so I think listening and talking to your internal folks who drive what the experience is going to be, and then the folks who are buying from you, has become even more important.
I totally agree. There's no shortcuts, right? And there's something to, listening and taking that impersonal relationship, impersonal communication down to an interpersonal communication and relationship, and really, having those personal disclosures in your day-to-day so they understand and know you better on that level, and then doing the same, creating a two-way street. So I completely appreciate that, Bob. In the book, we outline the framework to service as humanity, and there's 7 principles outlined. Empathetic, human-centered vision and orientation, communicate with passion and shared humanity, inclusive measures and impact metrics, we look at technology with empathy, right? It's not just, again, I'll reference Elizabeth Dixon, automate the transactional, elevate the relational was one of her comments at this year's symposium, her keynote. I really like that. There's a delicate balance in there, but technology with empathy, voice of the customer, and it's not just the robotic feedback mechanism, but actually deeply hearing that and getting into the weeds with the customer and learning. The other two are purposeful leadership and values aligned recruitment. So those are the 7 principles. Bob, could you maybe highlight one or two that really sort of speak to you and maybe give a quick definition from your viewpoint?
Yeah, I mean, let me talk about technology with empathy, and I think I tell this story in the booklet to some degree, which is my wife had to bring her car in to get maintenance service at our local dealership that we bought the car from. And in the past, when you wanted to find out if your car was ready, you just called and somebody answered in the service department and said, yeah, your car's ready, come pick it up. Well, they put in technology. They put in a virtual assistant that was front-ended any of the calls that came in. And so you could not get to a live person to answer a simple question, to the point where, coming from a tech support world, I was on the phone. I was literally like, agent, to get me to somebody live. And they turned something that should have been a very simple transaction, something that probably should have not had any emotion around it, to something that was negative. And so they put a technology in, and I can understand why they put it in. They're trying to be more efficient. Everybody's trying to do that. But they took out the empathy of, I just want a simple answer. It was a yes or no. And I think that's a great example of how not to implement technology with empathy, and to think about what is the response going to be to your customers depending on what the technology is that you put in place. I think the other thing is around purposeful leadership, and we touched on this a little bit already, which is your folks, your team members, your individual contributors, your frontline people, they can tell whether you are driving as a leader from an authentic place or not. They can sense it, and you can tell the leaders who are authentic and who are not authentic. Yeah. And I've seen them throughout. I've worked with people. I've worked in some cases for people in my career. I've had a lot of great leaders, but I've also had people who it's like, okay, is it really about us as a team, or is it about an individual? And folks want to have that purposeful leadership because they want to be a part of something. They want to feel like what they do every day, regardless of all the technology that's happening, the changes that they see every day with technology and AI and what's going on around them in the world, they want to be part of something, and they want to make sure that they're making a difference day in and day out. And you've got to be able to have that empathy and provide that to them, and have a high emotional content that they can connect with.
Yeah, and I'll give an example from something that I've always called out, and I think a lot of people have heard this story of Joshy the giraffe, right? The empowerment for that employee or set of employees to create that empathetic, human-centered approach and orientation, right? Where, but it also, it was a culture of innovation too. Like the employees were empowered to not only be caring, but to be creative in the approach of delivering care, right? So, the story goes, boy's favorite giraffe blanket left behind in the laundry chute. They found it. The child was irate, and rather than just putting it in the mail and sending it off and saying, hey, here you go, they staged the Joshy the giraffe towel in relaxing positions. So cucumbers on the eyes, umbrella in the drink, getting a massage, and sent a personalized message that, Joshy was on an extended vacation. He's having a great time, and just a cute story. And there's so many of other stories like that, right? Like Disney and the Dancing Princess. Lego had a great story with the child that lost his favorite Ninjago toy. And they, Sensei, who wanted wanted this Luca the Lego Maniac to have not only his replacement toy complimentary, but you've got to have the whole clan of Ninjago toys, because otherwise, what good does it do? So like, just these opportunities to really connect deeply with the customer in a human-centered way, and I love that. Do you have any human-centered stories of your own? Yeah,
I have one from a personal life. So
yeah,
my kid, when he was younger, we would fly a lot, and all he would see, he became really enamored with aviation, and he wouldn't really see pilots, he'd see flight attendants, and so he'd come home and he'd want to be when he was little, wanted to be a flight attendant, because he's like, well, that's how I can get a job in aviation. Well, one year at Christmas time, he asked for just things from the airline, including a life jacket. And at the time we had, at the time it was Santa Claus time and Elf on the Shelf and Mensch on the Bench and all that. He got all this stuff from the airline, but the one thing you can't get is a life jacket, because you cannot buy a life jacket online, nor can Santa, because if they don't work, they have to be disposed of. And so got all these great things, but the one thing he didn't get was the life jacket, and he was so disappointed. So I tweeted to the airline that on, I think it was Christmas Day, sent them an email. They sent me stuff back saying, well, we don't know if we can do anything today. The training center's closed. And so, but we'll try and do something for your son. So then this package shows up. And it was addressed, I have twin boys. It was they had handwritten letters to both my boys saying, we're so sorry you didn't get a life jacket at Christmas time, but hopefully you enjoy this. And they gave them a plush blanket and handwritten cards and games, all branded in the logo of the airline.
Yeah.
A couple of months go by, we get another package, similar type thing. Again, handwritten notes to the boys from the airline saying, we're so glad you're great customers, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally, I'd actually reached out to somebody that I knew that had worked at the airline, and they actually were able to secure from the training center a life jacket, a real life jacket. Yeah. They shipped it to us, and then we were able to have a note that said, oh, we're so sorry, Santa forgot this in the bag. They just found it, and my son ended up with what he was looking for. And so that created such a connection between him and the airline that it really fostered what he wants to do as a career. And so even now as an adult. And so it's those type of emotional connections, as we've talked about, that really leave a lasting impression.
I love it, Bob. It's such a great story. And it reflects back to many of the 7 principles, but the one that I want to call out is voice of the customer deeply heard, right? So, traditionally speaking, service organizations take an approach where, voice of the customer is both relational, and that's typically annual, sometimes semi-annual cadence, and then transactional after every transactional experience. But the in-betweens, the social listening, the reacting, the empowerment and the motivation for the team to respond and not just listen, but do something with it. That's what happened there. And I love that example. So great stuff. We had a comment come in, a question from our trusty colleague here, Gerardo. Thank you, Gerardo. Have you come across common fears or inertia-driven biases that prevent good leaders from embracing a services humanity framework? And this kind of is a leading question, into our next discussion, which is, in your view, who carries the responsibility for building a culture of service? Is it leaders? Is it frontline employees? Is it everyone? And what are those things that are causing hesitation to embracing this type of culture?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. And I think leaders can get caught up in inertia particularly if they've been in roles for a long time. And that ability to change can be a challenge. But leaders do set the culture. And whether it's within their team of a couple of people or whether it's in a large organization of thousands of people, they set what the culture is for that organization. And the team, you have to think of a way of how do you buy in your team members into that culture, because the culture is not going to necessarily be driven from a couple of team members got together and said, we want the culture to be this. If the leader doesn't support that, then the culture is not going to happen. And so, but again, I think it ties back to what we've talked about earlier, which is, having said that, you've got to always be listening to your team members, because they're going to tell you what are the pain points that are happening with your customers. They're going to tell you what are the challenges that are happening in them internally, because some tool got implemented that doesn't really work the way you thought it was going to work. And the leadership maybe thought it was great, but on the front line, it's not working that great. And so you've got to have those listening ears constantly to your team members to drive that culture of that connection and that humanity as part of it.
I love it. I think one of the common sort of issues that I've seen in terms of, a lack of true change is that some leaders are present for the build and they're not present for the teardown. They're not present for both. They lose their involvement from architecting the change. And then they struggle with, finding the champions within the organization. Sometimes they use the B team instead of the A team. You got to think about how does all the team row together. You've got to, repurpose and reshape what the purposes of this is. What are we solving? Why are we solving it? And you've got to be realistic with the change management effort and communicate it often, right? So those are some of the things that we've seen as inhibitors to true change management. Changing a culture can be, a real heavy lift. And
for sure.
And so those are some of the things that I would call out. But good question. Thank you, Gerardo. In sort of a supplement to that, right, is what are some of the behaviors that play in shaping whether humanity shows up at the customer level? Like what you talked about, personal disclosure, being authentic. What other behaviors have you seen that have worked well in this environment?
I think a lead one is empathy, right? And we talk about this, I think, in the book. And one of the things I would talk about, even with the advent of AI, yes, that is going to impact some service roles. Some roles may go away, but other roles will be created. And what's key is it's not all going to go away. Everything can't be automated, because it's, again, a service interaction is somebody's trying to get something solved from another entity. And so when that contact comes in or that phone call comes in, and a customer's already tried to solve things online or remotely or self-service through AI or something similar, they're really having a problem. You've got to have empathy on the other end of that phone line or that email or whatever it might be, because they've tried the ways to get things solved. Just like my example of trying to call to find out what happened with my wife's car. And so empathy is really key in figuring out how to build that empathy into your design of the technologies you want to go implement into your service engagement. I think, or even more so, even more key is to enable that, because then customers will feel that they really are being heard.
I love it. And we have a self exercise at the back of the book here that allows our readership and our listeners here to go through, taking away some action from the book, what they've learned in the book. And, in the area of empathetic, human-centered vision and orientation, we ask and provide a reflection prompt, which is, what does human-centered service mean in my context? And there's a fill in the blank exercise, and it's, my current approach focuses on fill in the blank, but to be more human-centered, I will begin by fill in the blank, right? So how can your behaviors change to become more human-centric? The second prompt, which is another workshop that is an instructional thing that comes out of the book, is to lead with empathy, I need to understand blank about the people that I serve, right? So how can I become more informed about who I'm serving, and what are those opportunities to perhaps be more empathetic in our leadership style? Bob, lots of cool stuff inside this book. This is just the mini version of the book, which, the full version is coming out early next year. This will be on Amazon soon, so we'll keep you updated on its availability. If you'd like an early edition copy, we still have some remaining from from the symposium, so please feel free to reach out. We could certainly arrange that. But what is the first?
And maybe you'll get an autographed copy from one of us.
Hey, you know what? We got a couple of autograph requests. That was humbling. So thank you to our guests in our audience. My kids would have me autograph something, and it would be paying for something. So this is great.
Right, exactly.
So what is the first practical action, Bob? Organizations or individuals reading the book can take to make humanity their service standard? What would you recommend our listenership?
I mean, I think the first thing is really kind of look inwardly to yourself, and are you leading with empathy, and are you having those conversations with your team members and with your other leaders and with your peers to have that feedback loop? I think that's one of the first things you have to do is really self-actualize and understand kind of where you're coming from, and don't be afraid to hear things that maybe you don't agree with or you don't like. Because in a lot of cases, how people perceive you is what their reality is. And so to be able to change those perceptions, you've got to be able to take that feedback and really action upon it. And so I think it really starts with you as an individual leader, and thinking about how you connect with people and with your team members.
I love it. I love it, Bob. Great feedback for our audience. And for those that are listening, we've come to our time today. If you'd like a briefing with our team to share with you a little bit of a deeper dive on, what are the 7 principles, how to, change and how to evolve to a services humanity-driven approach, we'd be happy to spend some time with you and your team. Please feel free to reach out to either one of us. We can coordinate that. Again, this is the early edition. There are still some available, limited edition. If you'd like a copy for you or your teammates, please feel free to reach out. We can arrange that. And the full-length version of the book will be available shortly. Both this early edition will be on Amazon, as will the upcoming book, which will be early part of 2026. So I wanted to thank our listening audience. Bob, thanks for spending a couple minutes with me today to walk through with our guests. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day, and go Red Sox.
That's right.